morning and welcome to the webinar. We're going to start in just a minute. I'm going to give it an extra sort of 90 seconds just for anybody joining later. Yeah. Okay. Right, then we're going to begin the webinar. We'll start recording. Welcome everybody to BrightBridge's webinar, what you need to know about ditching Sage 1000 from businesses that have already done it. I'm joined today by Edwin van Dijk from Monroe Packaging and Ian Greaves from Cotswold Architectural Products. We'll introduce our two guests very shortly, but both of these businesses are businesses that have used Sage 1000 in the past. Made a decision to migrate away from that, largely because of the end of life announcement from Sage. And they'll be talking about their experiences, their learnings and their thoughts on the project. If you have any questions during the course of the webinar, there's a Q&A button at the top of your screen. If you click on that and enter the question in there, and we'll address those towards the end of the webinar, or of course you can message myself or Fiona Worsfield, who's also on the webinar, directly with any questions you may have. Before we dive into the body of the webinar, I wanted to address a question that I'm very much asked on a regular basis by customers that have Sage 1000, and that is what does end of life actually mean, and what will happen on January the 1st in 2025 when you come back into the office. That is, of course, if you're working on New Year's Day. But first of all, if you are in that situation and you're using the product post 31st of December 2024, you will still be able to use it. The product will open, you will be able to process a sales order, raise an invoice, receipts of goods, whatever it is that you've used the application for previously. The difference will be that there will be no support from the author of the product, Sage. So if there's anything wrong with the application itself, there'll be nowhere to go to for that support to correct it. If there's any third-party applications or operating systems that Sage is reliant on, and those have changes due to updates in those products, and they're no longer compatible with Sage, then there'll be no development on there in order to accommodate that. In addition, one of the other things that you probably should consider about whether to make that move before end of life is cybersecurity. That's becoming an ever increasing threat to businesses around the globe, and often cyber criminals will prey on vulnerabilities within businesses, and an unsupported software system is and will be one of those vulnerabilities. In addition, you should also consider your supply chain commitments. Events over the past few years have meant significant disruption in supply chain. And well, I've got a door that's just opened in the background. We'll just close that. But those impacts within the supply chain have meant that businesses are now looking to make and build as much resilience into their supply chain as possible, and they may consider suppliers that are using unsupported software as a risk, and they may well have policies to mitigate against those risks. So potentially there could be the danger that you may put at risk relationships that you've worked hard to forge over the past few years. So if you've not already began that journey to move from Sage 1000, it's one that here at BrightBridge we definitely recommend that that you do and you start that journey as soon as possible. But rather than hear that all from me, as I say, I've got two esteemed guests on our webinar who I will introduce to you now. First of all, I'll turn to you, Edwin, if you'd like to give a hello and a little bit about your business to our audience.
Yes, as Gary said, my name is Edwin van Dijk. I work for Monroe Packaging. We supply the retail industry with a large variety of packaging materials, from simple plastic bags for charities and folders you find in your letterbox asking you to put your clothes outside on a Thursday, to high-end boxes for the likes of Harrods, Longchamp, the International Olympic Committee, just to name but a few. So, yeah, that's a brief introduction. We do not manufacture. We design, we sort, receive goods, and distribute those to either DCs or.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. Very esteemed collection of customers you've just named there. That's very impressive. And Ian, if I could ask you to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about Cotswold Architecture.
Yeah, morning. So Cotswold are a manufacturer and a distributor of friction stays, which are product that go into window frames. Our customer base generally are systems houses, some distribution. We did manufacture in the UK. We don't anymore. We have a couple of subsidiaries in India where we are manufacturing now. So the UK facility has fairly recently moved to become a distribution hub. And the large majority of our products, probably 75% of our sales are UK based, the rest are Europe and a couple of other places around the world.
Excellent. Excellent. Okay, thank you for that. So one of the first things that I wanted to chat about and ask you both about really was the background of your move from Sage 1000. I'm interested in what really motivated you to move from Sage 1000 when you did. Was it purely because of end of life, or were there other factors involved which sort of prioritised that decision and made you do it perhaps earlier than otherwise you may have done? So Ian, if I could maybe ask you a little bit about that.
Yes, so Cotswold is an American-owned business. We were part of a larger group up to about 16 months ago, and then the group itself got sold, but the Cotswold business remained in the ownership of the shareholders. Part of that process meant that we needed to go through an amicable divorce from our previous parent company, and Sage 1000 was a shared system. So our journey was somewhat dictated by a legal necessity.
Yeah.
However, prior to the sale, we'd already made the decision that we were going to start looking for a replacement system. That really just expedited the process. So end of life was definitely a consideration for us. I think anybody who uses Sage 1000, maybe not everybody, but a lot of people who use Sage 1000 probably would also be considering other systems that were maybe more integrated, particularly if you're on the manufacturing side of things. It had its limitations. So it was a number of factors for us, Gary, but really the timescale was expedited as a result of the change in business structure.
Yeah. Okay. And you mentioned there that certainly there were some limitations that you'd felt within Sage 1000, which might have influenced your thought process anyway. But generally, how did you find the product? How long had you been using it? What was the perception of the product amongst your staff at Cotswold Architecture?
I think people knew Sage's limitations and accepted them.
Yeah.
We had a good internal resource to enable us to extract data from it and modify it in ways that we needed to. We were a fairly reasonable sized manufacturing business. We were using it, 120 odd employees. So, the main limitation, I think, for us was always around the lack of a really good MRP element to Sage, and also the lack of full integration as well around some of the ledger postings. But generally, people adapt to that. The danger is that people find workarounds where the system doesn't offer strong integration. So, from our perspective, a fully integrated system solution to replace Sage 1000 was, key priority.
Yeah. Okay. So you managed to work around some of those limitations. Generally, the perception that I get is other than that, it was well regarded though by those that used it.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay. Good. And Edwin, your what was your sort of motivations for moving when you did, and what was the background to your Sage 1000 estate, as it were? How many users did you have, etc.?
We had about 35 users. The reason for the change was twofold, really. We used Sage 1000 and Sage CRM. The two didn't really talk to each other, and as a result, we had a great level of duplication across the various functions. But you mentioned there was also a hardware background. We had a highly, let's call it, Monroeified version. We used some third-party providers together with Sage, Faction, DB Forms, De facto, and we had been running Sage for about 10 years, and it was running on servers that became versions that became unsupported. If I had to make the change to new servers, we had to Monroeify the whole package again for a product which was basically out of date. And that, although it became incomplete for us. And that's when we make the decision to change, and we evaluated various offerings on the market, and came to the conclusion that NetSuite was the most likely product to give us what we wanted.
Okay. And we'll talk a little bit more about those systems that you may have looked at, and the reasons as to why you chose the system that you did very shortly.
You may hear the sandwich van arrive here.
Sorry, what was that?
I said, if you may hear the sandwich vans arrive here. They arrive around this time and make a lot of noise. Sorry about that.
Well, at least people know it's live. So yeah, you have 35 users, and as I said, by the sounds of it, a lot of your sort of trigger point was around your server operating system coming up to end of life, or reliability of a server was probably the main trigger factor for Monroe. Is that fair to say?
Well, there was definitely a hardware background to it, but we also came to the conclusion more and more that the combination of Sage 1000 and Sage CRM didn't give us what we were looking for in the long term.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. So that was another big bonus for looking for something integrated. Okay. So we looked into sort of the background to Sage. That there were products that you'd used for a long time. They were successful. They ran your business. There were a couple of things that sort of influenced that decision to move when you did. So what systems did you look at, and Were there many, or did you purely look at one system? Edwin, you mentioned obviously you'd looked at NetSuite, you moved to NetSuite. What else did you consider during your assessment time?
Well, of course, we considered Sage as well.
Yeah.
But and there were a couple of others that I can't even remember the names of at the moment.
Yes, yeah, indeed. And what did you find about those? Were there systems out there that particularly impressed you, or did they seem similar? What were your thoughts from somebody just looking at software for probably the first time in quite a while?
Well, I can tell you why we chose NetSuite.
Okay.
Rather than perhaps focus on some of the negative aspects of others. But we liked the fact that it was cloud-based and that we didn't have to have on-premise servers anymore. It also would give us the benefit of always being on the latest version, having our backup costs had increased tremendously over the last couple of years, and that would fall away to some extent. And of course, the security that Oracle could provide. But there were, of course, we looked at the functionality, and that's where NetSuite stood out for us, to be able to give us a far more reduced duplication of efforts, more unified processes, significantly reduced paper trail,
Yeah.
and some enhanced reporting capabilities.
Okay. Yeah. Those were the big points for you. So functionality and reporting, and as you mentioned, and some of the other benefits from a cloud-based system, your backups covered, and also you're on the latest version, which every single one of our customers is on exactly the same version, the latest release. Ian, what about you? What was your process of assessing the marketplace, and what influenced your decisions?
So we identified three systems that we felt were going to tick a couple of boxes for us. Budget was obviously a reasonably key one. You can obviously add a number of zeros to numbers if you start going with some big systems. The ability to be able to integrate it quite quickly and implement quite quickly was quite important. But really the solution and having a fully integrated solution was a key aspect of it. We narrowed it down to three. Sage 200 was a system that some of our users had used previously, and obviously there was the potential benefits of data migration from Sage 1000 to 200. SAP Business One and NetSuite, obviously. So we sought partners for each of those, had presentations from them with a number of what we would call key users. We then set out 8 or 9 criteria points, marked them, and made a decision on the basis of the criteria points and probably our gut feel as well, really. And I'd agree with some of the things that Edwin said, really, around, you know, NetSuite ticked most of the boxes that we felt were important. The other packages, Sage 200 felt like it was maybe didn't have the complexity that we needed necessarily in terms of where we are and where we're going to go. We also had the slight complexity of potentially needing to think about a group solution and a rollout into India. SAP obviously had all of the functionality, but potentially felt a little bit like a sledgehammer to crack a nut. NetSuite was probably sat in that sweet spot, if you'll excuse the pun, really, that ticked the large majority of the boxes, and we felt we could implement it quickly, and have a solution that was then, gave us the ability to be able to roll it out into other parts of the business if we needed to.
Yeah, indeed. That's an interesting sort of process there. So obviously, when you were reviewing the different systems, you decided internally to focus on sort of key requirements. I think you mentioned about 8 key requirements that you focused on, and those were what were important for you to make sure they were addressed in the system that you employed moving forward. Yeah, that's good. Good advice and a good tactic. So, so you decided on your systems. What made you choose BrightBridge, Ian? What was it that gave you the confidence that BrightBridge were the right partner to work with?
So a couple of things really. We obviously were already partnering with BrightBridge on Sage 1000, so
Yes.
we had the benefit of having relationships already. But we did, once we decided on NetSuite, we spoke with Oracle and asked them to give us the names of 2 or 3 partners who they partner with to deliver an implementation. And we spoke with a couple of those, as well as BrightBridge. I think the key for us was, what swung it were the relationships we already had. We had some history where we worked with BrightBridge on the Sage 1000 implementation, subsequent to that as part of Sage 1000. And we had the confidence to know that we delivered something with you guys before, and felt like that was a kind of fairly deciding factor. These things often work on the back of relationships and confidence in businesses that are able to deliver, and that's what was the deciding factor for us.
Yeah, indeed. Okay, excellent. And Edwin, what made you decide to sort of work with BrightBridge for your migration project?
I could probably repeat everything that Ian just said. You were the devil we knew. And yes, there were definitely already good relationships in place. We moved to BrightBridge from cyber, and of course, quite a few of your colleagues came from cyber.
Indeed.
And, so we stuck, as I said, with the devil we knew.
Yeah. Okay. Excellent. Well, that's as I say, you are both customers we've worked with for quite a considerable time, and it's great that you feel the confidence in what we delivered to you in the past to have led you to commission us to your migration project. So you commissioned us. I suppose my next question really for the audience is, how happy were you with that decision, both from a software perspective and also from a partner perspective? Did we do what we said we were going to do, and how did the software work out in the end? Edwin, what were your thoughts?
We came out of a very difficult period when we implemented NetSuite. We just had the pandemic. Brexit was about to happen or happened, and funnily enough, we coming out of the pandemic, business was booming, and if I said, did BrightBridge deliver? The answer is yes. Did we always have the necessary resources available? The answer is probably no. But we did spend a lot of time on let's call it the specification stage, which was good.
Yeah.
And I think we've read the benefits from that. But I was also very much aware that as we progress using NetSuite, we need to further develop what we started with, and I think that's the beauty of NetSuite is that it's so scalable and customizable. So we had one of the what's it called again? I think it's called Learning Pass. You get oh, I don't know, it's called the Oracle Academy or whatever. So send someone there, and because I think it's and yes, we are growing our NetSuite system almost on a daily basis.
Yeah, yeah. So so yeah, the project went well. It's interesting you mentioned there
Well, there
about.
was some delay.
Sorry.
There was some delay. I think
Yes.
initially we thought we would implement in October, and that became 6 months later. But that decision was largely driven by Monroe and not the effect of BrightBridge not delivering.
Yeah. It's it's one of the points that I was going to raise, because often I think for businesses, these aren't projects that you implement frequently. We do it as our day job every day, but sometimes there can be a lot of resource that you need to put into these projects, and people have got their day jobs to do as well, and being able to devote that resource is can be a challenge. And I guess really for businesses out there that are yet to embark on that process with sort of 15 months left till the end of life, if they want to move from this product before that 15 months up, that really is a testimony to starting that project as soon as you can, because it will often take a little bit longer than anticipated, because as I mentioned, everybody's got a day job to do. You need to keep the wheels of the business moving on a day-to-day basis as well. Ian, what were your experiences?
So as we had a fairly tight time scale, given that we had a legal agreement to be off our Sage license. The remit we gave to BrightBridge was a pretty tight one, really. We launched the project 1st of January this year, with a deadline of going live by the end of June, but we actually set it at the end of April, knowing that if we had any slippage, we had a little bit of breathing space. But we actually went live for 1st of May.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I echo the points that Edwin's made, really. With a project like this, I'm sure a lot of your audience have probably gone through this process. I've certainly done a few in my time, and the key to it really is managing expectations in the business, the resource you need, particularly around data from your legacy system. Sage 1000, the biggest part of the work is really, in cleansing your data and all of that. But in terms of how it went, we were clear on what we needed to deliver. And we were really clear with BrightBridge that we didn't want them to say they could commit to that and not be able to deliver. So we kind of set the ground rules early on and agreed to commit the resource that was needed to do it. And it worked pretty smoothly. I was also really keen, being obviously the FD, to make sure the budget was very well kept a lid on, shall we say. And so really, between us, we delivered the project in time, slightly under budget, which was great. And yeah, kind of no complaints about that. One of the things that I think I really would say worked well was the project management side from BrightBridge. Edwin's right. It's often a bit of a balancing act, and more often than not, the reason these things push out is generally because the client's not able to commit enough resource or time into it, which often has to be handled reasonably sensitively. And that part worked very well with us and BrightBridge. That partnership worked well. There were, some days were difficult, but we worked through it and delivered the project at the end.
Excellent, excellent. Yeah, that sort of project governance, I think, is an enormously crucial part of that, and being able to sort of reassess where you are and make sure that you're on track, both from time, both from budget, and the team that are involved in a project have the authority and the means to be able to deliver what's asked of them is quite an important part. Excellent. So looking back, are there any challenges or advice that you would give somebody watching this webinar that you'd apart from obviously the bits that we've mentioned already? Is there any key snippets of advice from you, Ian?
I would say kind of be realistic, go into it with your eyes open. You know, for us and for most businesses, you know, the ERP system's the beating heart of it, and making it work for you is the key aspect of it. The things that we would look at, if I was to go back and give myself some advice on the 1st of January this year, I think I would say that our attention to detail in terms of the master data and making sure that was right, that required the most part of the resource for us.
Yeah.
And we probably spent a bit more time than I would like after we went live correcting some of those mistakes. And I think kind of the output documents part for us was quite key as well. That required quite a lot of resource post implementation that I think we could have avoided if we'd prepared ourselves better. So I think I would just make, you know, the recommendation would be to make sure you've got resource, that people are committed to delivering it. Yeah. And I wouldn't give yourself too long to do it. I think the longer you give yourself, the more chance you've got of it being extended. You know, yes. Our 4-month deadline felt fairly ambitious from all sides when we started, but it does have a tendency to focus your mind, and it limits the stretch on resource as well for that period. So I think those were our main takeaways. Yeah.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. And Edwin, any snippets of advice from yourself?
Well, do think about your specification, what you want the system to do, and be quite rigorous in that. Now, the difficulty is that if you move, for instance, from Sage, you will need some help in that, because you don't know what NetSuite can deliver and how it can be developed. And we had several, we started off with several workshops, and that's basically where we build on. And as said, try and get some very good in-house understanding of NetSuite as well. And I think that I mentioned this Oracle Academy. It is worthwhile sending an apprentice or whoever and make them spend some time on it and understand the system.
Yeah, indeed. A key user that can really champion the system for you and know where those efficiencies can be gained.
Yes.
Excellent. Good. Okay, well, we've pretty much come to the end of our time. I just got 2 questions actually from the webinar. One was about new releases, and you know, how have they happened? We mentioned being on the latest version. NetSuite do releases twice yearly. So what's your experience of those been? Have they been disruptive, or are they not disruptive?
Our experience of it has been relatively limited. You know, we're 4 or 5 months in.
Yes.
The main disruption for us is when a big release is coming up. The sandbox, which is the test area in NetSuite, does tend to go pretty slow, and if you want to test some things and changes, it potentially just push that back a little bit. But apart from that, really, you know, a lot of it happens in the background, really, Gary, and it's been pretty uneventful.
Okay, excellent. Edwin, your experiences of that?
NetSuite are warning well in advance of new releases coming out. In addition to the sandbox, they give you a release preview where you can test everything to your heart's delight. And there is lots of documentation on new releases. I personally have not experienced any major hiccups in our functionality when a new release came out. Although I had to make some changes in centers, but they were a 5-minute job.
Okay. Well, that's good to hear, and will be reassuring, I think, to people looking at NetSuite. I did mention I had another question, and Ian, that was from the project manager that you spoke so highly of. Something about a bonus payment, but I'll skip over that question.
You're breaking up, Gary. Sorry.
So thank you both for your time this morning. There's one thing as well that I wanted to just touch on as a side to the content of this webinar, and that is the press release that we issued last week from BrightBridge about the recent investment in BrightBridge by FPE Capital. FPE Capital are an investment business. They invest in IT services companies that are profitable and proven, and we were one of those. And that investment led us to being merged with 2 other businesses that merged earlier in the year to form NoBlue 2, which is now certainly within EMEA, the largest NetSuite partner. And for our customers, and also for our prospective customers, I guess the main message that we are that we're talking about is our resource and our skill base is significantly improved. It was always very strong, particularly for NetSuite, but it's now significantly more than that. And we've got the availability to deliver projects, as you mentioned, quickly, on time, but also deliver the right personnel with the right skill base to really advise on finance matters, WMS matters, whatever it may be. So that's great news. As a result, we're holding a sorry.
And you will have a shorter email address.
And a shorter email address as well. Yeah, that's a benefit that I hadn't considered, but you're absolutely right. We've got also a customer day happening next week on the 27th of September.